Going back to what you just said about development, that's really one of the things that's kept me engaged as a fan, right? So perhaps the story that maybe even casual people would know is Ricardo Pepi, right? Comes all the way up through the FC Dallas system, plays for a couple years on the top team at FC Dallas, plays very well, gets a contract to go overseas, and now, I mean, very well could be the starting number 9 for the United States in the World Cup next year. Not to mention guys like Weston McKennie, Chris Richards, and several others. I think at a couple points I've looked at some of the different pools that get called up to play for the United States, and it's 20 to 25% of the players often have ties back to the academy at FC Dallas. So would you explain first, for casual fans who don't know a lot about how soccer works or MLS works, how the academy system works and what makes that so unique in professional sports? And then also just how Dallas has been so successful at producing these world-class players right out of Frisco.
Yeah, so an academy system, most soccer teams around the world, they have an academy system, which is basically a youth system where you get young players, sometimes as young as like 8 or 9 years old. And, you know, they're within your teams and your youth coaches, and you develop them to become, as they get older, to become professional players for your first team. And obviously it's like a pyramid shape. You know, you get hundreds or even thousands of players in your youth system, and it's the cream of the crop through the age groups. And eventually you'll have 3 or 4 per year that get signed to professional contracts, and 1 or 2 of those guys will go on to be mainstays in your first team. And FC Dallas was really the first MLS club to focus on that and make that part of the club's ethos. I think the academy system was founded in MLS back in 2008. And Dallas put a big onus on making that a big part of it. Part of that is because there's so much talent in Texas and in the DFW area specifically. And so basically you mentioned the 20%, 25% of U.S. national team players that have roots with FC Dallas. And that's because the club just focused on it 15 years ago now or so. And so you see, of course, if you focus on it back then, you only see the fruits of your labor 10 years on or so, because you get these players so young. And you mentioned the Ricardo Pepi example. I'll just kind of talk through his career real quick, just to give people a concrete example of what this looks like. So he's from El Paso, born in 2003, and he played in the NFC Dallas affiliate club out in El Paso. And then Lucha Gonzalez, our former academy director and who became a head coach later on, he goes on a scouting trip to go check out the talent within the El Paso affiliate. He sees Ricardo Pepi, this like lanky 12-year-old who's just banging in goals. He says, let's get this guy to the academy. Pepi moves to Frisco, lives with the host family for a year or so before his family moves all the way over to get them all over here. And he goes through the age groups from U12 and on. And then once he's 15, he signs a pro contract with our reserve team, North Texas SC. That's when I met him, because I used to head up their social media and media relations. So that's how I started with FC Dallas. And then, yeah, he does well there. Scored a hat trick on his debut at 16 years old. Eventually gets signed by the first team FC Dallas. 18 months later, he's the star of the young star of MLS. He goes to the All-Star game. He's playing for the national team. He scores in Q2 in Austin for the national team. Yep, I figured that was the game you went to. Yep. That was a really, really cool one. I would have loved to have been there in person, but had to stay up in Dallas. And then, yeah, he does so well with FC Dallas that he goes on to sign with the club in Germany for $19-20 million. And so that's the pro pathway. You know, you get a kid at 10, 11, 12, coach them up through the youth ranks. They make their debut, and then if you know that they're good enough, they'll stay in your first team. And if they're perhaps potentially even too good, they maybe outgrow the league and then go on to the European leagues and oftentimes the men's national team. So that it's a really cool. It's my favorite part of honestly FC Dallas and pro soccer in general, is watching these guys grow into incredible professional athletes and really good people as well. So that's a really cool thing to see up close and personal.
I think it's so much more functional too, Garrett, just to compare it to other sports people are familiar with. And like, you know, football, it's recruiting out of high school into a university, and then now we've got transfer portals and NIL, and then you hope that you make the NFL. And if you don't make the NFL, there's really not a great pro option unless you just want to pay for like no money. And you know, basketball, you've got the AAU system, or baseball, you've got select, but even that is all kind of expensive or unregulated in some ways. And then it's again college and transfer portals and NIL and will I make the pros? Whereas, you know, with soccer, you know, if you're good enough at 16 to play for the senior team, like you've already been within that structure for so long, you just get promoted. It feels like such a better pathway for a young athlete.